Thank you all very much. Thank you very much for coming tonight. Okay, so we're a small but austere group as usual. So thank you all for coming, and maybe some more people will join us as we continue along for this evening. So why don't we get started with the opening prayers? So if everybody has your 101 prayer book, we should do our opening prayers. Start with the altruistic motivation on page 1. So everybody read out loud to yourself, but keep your microphone on, but read out loud, or rather turn your microphones off so we don't feed back to each other. But be robust, have devotion, and as you recite these words, these prayers, be thinking about the meaning of them, what they mean to you. So we begin with the altruistic motivation. All mothers, sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mothers, sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles to my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Dagla dangwa jepe dra no pa jepe ge. Tarpa dang tam she ken pe bar du jo par je pa tam she ki so je pe. Manam ka dam yam pe sem chen tam she de wa dang den. Dog now dang drel nor du la na me pa yang dag par zog pe zhang zhu brin po she to pa ja. Action bodhicitta prayer. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Deshe du sang ma ge gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Ma she bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Du de ring ne song te ni ma sang ta sam gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. The long refuge prayer. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. Dren san sa wa dangur par je pe pao dan la ma dam pa nam la kab su chi o. Yedam kil gorgi la sok nam la kab su chi o. Sangye chom den de nam la kab su chi o. Dam Pe Cho Nam La Kap Su Chi Ho. Pa Wo Ka Dro Cho Kyung Song Mei Song Yes She Gi Chang Dang Dem Pa Nam La Kap Su Chi Ho. Next is the Taking the Bodhisattva Vow, page 4. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Changshu Ningpo Chi Ki Bar Sangye Namla Kapsu Chi Chodang Shangshub Sampayi Soklang De Shin Kapsu Chi Jita Nongi De Shegi Shangshub Tugni Ke Pada Shangshub Sampe La Pala De Dagrim Shin Ne Pata De Shin Drola Bandandu Shangshub Samni Ke Shing De Shin Duni La Pala Rempa Shindu La Pajio. The short refuge prayer. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye Chodang Soki Chonam Shangju Baidu Dagni Kapsu Chi Dagi Jinsoki Pe Sonamgi Drola Penshir Sangye Jupasho. And the four immeasurables. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadam yam pe sem chen tam she dewa dang dewe gurdang dembar jurchi. Dug now dung du now gi gu dang dwell war jurchi. Dug now me pe dewa dang mi dwell war jurchi. Nay ring chak dang ni dang drill way dang nam la ne pa jor chi. Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of the opening prayers or anything that we've talked about in the past number of weeks? Please just turn your microphone on and speak right up. Okay, so everybody is happy, satisfied, and understanding what we're doing. Well, that's good. I'm just looking for a couple of pictures I want to put up here. Excuse me 1 second. Okay, let me see if this is, there we go. Okay, so y'all can see the wheel of existence there. All right, good. So what we've been talking about, we've been kind of working up to understanding who it is that we are, what it is that we think about, and why it is that we need to have some kind of a system to understand ourselves and to be able to bring ourselves onto the path of enlightenment. And then how to do that, to find a way in which to do that. So the what that we're trying to look at, the what we're trying to understand is the what are our causes of our suffering. So we looked at that for a couple of weeks now. We looked at that there are afflictive emotions. We looked at we mentioned the idea that there is mental misconceptions and that there are habitual tendencies. And these three things are the things that keep us suffering, keep us in the realm of samsara, keep us in the mind of samsara. These three things: afflictive emotions, mental misconceptions, and habitual tendencies. So what we've been really concentrating on have been the afflicting emotions, what the afflictive emotions are, what the causes of them are, and how they manifest, and then what are the antidotes for them. So we explained it in terms of the 5 poisons, that there were the 5 poisons of hatred, of greed, of desire, of jealousy, of delusion, and pridefulness. These are the poisons, and that there were these antidotes that we can use to be able to overcome these poisons. So the antidotes were loving kindness for hatred, was generosity for greed, was objectivity, being able to kind of withdraw and be able to see a bigger picture, objectivity, to be able to understand desire, and fearlessness to overcome jealousy, and education to overcome ignorance. And pride, we're adding pride tonight as the 6th poison, and we overcome that by understanding the falsity of what might be our temporary transcendence, our transcendence. So we're going to look at that a little bit more and try and understand this. We then looked at how these things manifest, how these poisons manifest, and we put up this screen which showed the 6 realms, the 6 human realms. So just to review this, the God realm was up at the top, and the God realm was the result of pride. And that the hell realm at the other end of this is anger, and then this was the result of hatred. And then in the demigod realm, this over here, the demigods, was conflict, and this was there because of jealousies. And then over here is the hungry ghost realm, and the hungry ghost realm was there because of greed. We wind up there because of greed. And then over in the animal realm, over here in this animal section here, we're there because of ignorance. And then finally, the sixth is the human realm that is listed here. And this is, we're here because of desire, to be able to have, to want to have our whole life, to want to be able to have these six realms of this human existence, because this is what we call the psychophysical drama of being a human being. So we can be a human being and think that maybe we are a god. We can be a human being and think that maybe we are a titan, a demigod. We can be a human being and think that we are an animal or behave like an animal. We can be a human being and behave like hungry ghosts, miserable. And we can be a human being and act with great anger and hatred as being in a hell realm. Being in the desire realm here in the human realm is the altogether this takes place, and we can choose to be conflicted by these poisons, by these six human realms, or we can liberate ourselves from this and be a complete human being. And to become a complete human being means to recognize that we have our physical body and that we have our intellectual body, but that we also have our spiritual body. So our spiritual body is what we're trying to understand. So the terms of how this works and so on. So to understand this a little bit further, we need to understand what the benefits are of being able to apply the antidotes to these poisons, to recognize that we have these poisons, that we have these emotional afflictions and so on. But then as we work these wisdoms, as we integrate the wisdoms into our life, that we have benefit from that. So to review again, we talked about that we had in hatred, that there was, that we can practice the antidote of loving kindness, and that we developed the wisdom, the mirror-like wisdom, the wisdom where we are like looking into a mirror and seeing all this phenomenal stuff around us, and it is all just compounded ideas, concepts of what we think is real, of what we think is permanent, but it's really all just temporary. Everything in our life is temporary. Our bodies are temporary. All these things around us, all this phenomenal nature is temporary. So when we learn to be able to have the wisdom of mirror-like wisdom, we see that all these things are temporary, and that why have any kind of commitment to being able to say, oh, well, being a human being is the best thing that I can be. Rather, we're letting go of what it is to be a human being and to be able to transcend our human nature to our Buddha nature, to our true nature, that which we carry with us in our heart center. This is our true nature. So a human being means that we have a physical nature, our physical body. We have an intellectual nature, our mind, our brain, and all the memories, all the things that we do and everything with that. And so that's all temporary. But we have this true nature, which stays, which is a part of this continuum, for lack of a better word, that there's this continuum that we are all part of, that all human beings are sharing in, and being able to learn to recognize that. So to be able to recognize that the physical nature, the intellectual nature are compounded appearances. So if we have this recognition of compounded appearances, then there's no need to get angry about things. There's no need to have hatred. And we can let that go by practicing loving kindness. So what comes out of that, the result of that, is the benefit of cohesion. Cohesion. So another way of looking at this, and let me go back to, let me see if I can find this real quick. 1 second. Just a moment. Just a moment. Sorry for the delay here. Okay, well, we're going to abandon this. What I was looking for was the mandala that we were looking at that Michael had as his screensaver, as his background. And if you remember, there were the quadrants. There was the water quadrant. There was the yellow quadrant. There was the earth quadrant. There was the red quadrant. There was the fire quadrant. There was the green quadrant. There was the wind, air quadrant, and then there was the white center that was space, that was regarded as space. So if we look at the hatred as being in this lower part, as being that needs this loving kindness to be able to overcome this hatred, it's like water being applied to this hatred. And the water just wears it down. The water just wears it down. If we use loving kindness over and over again, the loving kindness just wears down those obstructions, those obstacles, those confusions that we have. And then it becomes like liquefied. It may be very hard and rigid in the beginning, but it becomes liquefied. The water is a very good example of this, because water, if we look under a microscope at a drop of water, we see that there's all kinds of stuff inside the water. There's particles of dirt, there's particles of debris, of different matter that has been picked up by the water and so on. So the water is like a suspension, is holding all this stuff. So it's like a cohesion. So this cohesion then is symbolic of this wisdom of being able to look at all things as appearances, see all these things, but know that it's all empty of its own nature, that it's all just part of the appearances of what our ordinary human life is. So we'll come back to this. Let that sink in for a moment. Then we go to the next one. The next one would be greed. So how do we overcome greed? We overcome greed with generosity. And generosity is like saying that we have the earth all around us, that we have all the nutritions of the earth, we have all the jewels, all the riches of the earth and so on, and we're sharing that with all beings. And this gives us this wisdom of equanimity, the wisdom of equanimity, of sameness, that all things are the same, that because we are in this phenomenal nature of all the things that we see around us, this table, these things on the wall, the trees, the grass, all the animals, all these different things, and all these different people, all these different beings and so on, is seeing all this natural phenomenal stuff as being all the same, because as we break it down, it gets broken down into molecules, it gets broken down into elements, it gets broken down into atoms, and the atoms get broken down into subatomic particles and so on. And we see that we're all just the result of all these building blocks of all these different levels of compounded nature. So this wisdom of equanimity means that we're all built up of all these same things. So what's the benefit of recognizing this, of realizing this? It's the benefit of enrichment, increasing. So as the earth is symbolic of this yellow section of the wheel that we were talking about, this yellow section of the wheel is the earth, which means all these riches, everything for us in this life comes from the earth. You know, we have particles and so on that are all shared by the whole cosmos, but the things that support our life all come from the earth. And then we use the things of the earth to be able to trade in commerce and money, and our society moves around things that we may have, and we'll exchange, this precious jewel here, I'll exchange that for something that somebody can do for me or my family, that I will give them this money. And then there's other things, there's gold and there's silver, all these different things and so on like that. So this enrichment can also be spirituality, can be understanding, can be knowledge, it can be a lot of different things. So this enrichment is the benefit of realizing greed being overcome by generosity and developing the wisdom of equanimity. Okay, hold that thought. If anybody has any questions while I'm talking, don't hesitate to ask. Okay, so then the next thing is desire. So we talked about desire, attachment, holding on, wanting to have things and so on like that. And that the element here is fire. And the fire is like a ripening. It's like a ripening. When we get our component parts together, when we get the earthly things together and so on, and you apply heat to it, pardon me, it begins to cook a little bit. And as it cooks, it comes together and things, nutrition comes out of it, it blends together and so on like that. So it cooks, it ripens, the heat is produced. So this ripening that comes from this heat becomes the discriminating awareness, the wisdom of discriminating awareness that we develop, that we cultivate by this process of looking at our attachments, looking at our desire, by becoming objective about it, by moving away from it and being able to see it as a whole thing and being able to decide, well, I'm going to look at this right now. I don't need to look at this over here. But then later on, I'm going to look at this and I might bring in a little bit of this to look into that as well. So it's having discriminating awareness to know which of these different compartmentalized objects that we begin to think about, we begin to bring together. So we're bringing together physical things, we're bringing together mental, intellectual things, but we're also bringing together spiritual things. So as we do this, this is all cooking together. This is all coming together, producing heat. And then this is producing this wisdom for us, this understanding, this coming together of what it is that we are, these emotions, and how when we overcome them, how they become these wisdoms. So there is the ripening or the cooking of these disparate phenomenal objects that are all around us. The next thing we come around is we look at jealousy. Now, jealousy was in the green section, and maybe I didn't mention that the desire is in the red section. So the fire was in the red section. The green is in the section of wind, represents the wind. And through this fearlessness, if we apply fearlessness as the antidote to jealousy, jealousy is a poor sense of well-being, a poor sense of who we are, a sense of being kind of like paralyzed and thinking that I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't have this, I can't have that, and I'm jealous because there's jealousy, this envy just immobilizes me because of my fear. But if I can overcome the fear, then I feel that I can move about, I can do things, I can apply the things that I've learned, I can apply this ripening, I can apply the enrichment, I can apply the cohesion that I was experiencing through these other parts of moving through this wheel. I can apply that, and the benefit is movement, that I'm not paralyzed, that I can move. I've got mobility. I can move physically, I can move intellectually, and I can move spiritually through all this. I begin to see how all this is all comes together. So now we come to the center part, which was the white part in that wheel. And the center part was the space, was the element space. And here is delusion. Here is ignorance. And to overcome ignorance, we apply education. We use the antidote of education to be able to find a system by which we can analyze who we are, what we are, the things that we're doing, and so on, and be able to have a spacious quality in our sense now, in our sensibility, and our mind becomes free. We can move about in this sense of freedom. So this precipitates as the accomplishing of, or rather the wisdom of all-pervading wisdom, all-pervading wisdom. And I'm sorry, but I forgot to mention that when we were talking about the jealousy, that by using the fearlessness, we are developing the all-accomplishing wisdom, all-accomplishing wisdom. So I hope you're writing this down, because this is it's a lot of stuff, I know. But by your writing it down and being able to reflect on it later is how you really get to understand what it is I'm talking about. I'm talking about these basic component parts of what it is to overcome, to recognize and overcome these afflictive emotions, but you need to be able to digest it. And if you're not writing it down in some way or another, I don't know how you can hold on to these ideas. So anyway, so all accomplishing wisdom was in the green section. That was the wind section that was overcoming jealousy through fearlessness. So back to the center now, and talking about space, the color white, and the all-pervading, this is the all-pervading wisdom. This all-pervading wisdom, you see, is what overcomes this delusion, this ignorance. If we have all-pervading wisdom, that it's like turning on a light switch in a dark room. We walk in the dark room, everything is black. We can't recognize anything. We can't see anything. We can't understand anything. But you turn on the light switch and now everything becomes illuminated. So this is symbolic of our education. When we begin to learn about what nature is, what phenomenal nature is, the things that hold us, to attach to this, and the things that liberate us from this, we're educating ourselves. And we develop this wisdom, this all-pervading wisdom. So the benefit of this is growth. It's making use of our growth potential, that we have a growth potential, and now we are actualizing that growth potential into real growth. To growth, not as just an ordinary human being who's just a physical body and an intellectual mind, excuse me, but a complete human being who also has their spiritual body together with that. And then we become a complete human being. So this is looking at what the poison is, what the antidote is, what the wisdom is, and then what the benefit of putting this all together is. So now we come to this one part about pride. I said we were going to come to this. We were going to talk about this separately tonight. And that means that pride is what the gods, the devas, the human gods, I should say, the human gods, those who think that they know everything, but they don't have real compassion. They're not able to help other beings, but they have this knowledge. They have this understanding of the world, of phenomenal nature and so on, but they don't have the means to be able to actualize it, to be able to express it and so on, for a number of reasons, many different reasons and so on. So the thing that they have to recognize is that they have this, but that they hide in this. There becomes a falsity of their wisdom. They see their wisdom as something that makes them better than other beings. They become conceited. They become arrogant with this. They begin to think, oh, well, being a human being is the best thing that we possibly can be. And being a human being gives us the ability to be able to know all things that are out in space and so on like that. So we learn things when we go out there. There's no doubt about that. There's things that we should do with modern science, things that we do, to help us to improve. But to falsely think about it as being that we are the epitome of what existence is a false thing. And these devas have that sense about them. That's what they think about. So the problem is they don't have a sense of responsibility to nature. They don't have a sense of responsibility to other beings. They're doing this for their own self-aggrandizement. They may be doing it in the name of humankind, but we can see where so much of this is there's still so much suffering that goes on in the world. There's wars. We see that there's famine. We see that there's disease and so on. And these deva-like beings, these God-like beings who have figured these things out, don't have the ability to be able to take the responsibility to be able to say, well, here it is. Here are solutions that we really can work toward, instead of working towards these false ideas, concepts of what success of being a human being would be. Thinking of individually what they can do, what satisfies them. So we have to recognize that on this wheel, and we talk about these wheels all the time, these wheels are self-generating demons. That we create these demons for ourselves. These demons are within ourselves, and the demons that are what manifests as the hatred, the demons that manifest as the jealousy, what manifests as the greed, as the delusion, as the anger, as the hatred. I think I mentioned it all, and as the pridefulness are these self-generating demons that we do within ourselves. So what we're trying to do ultimately is to liberate ourselves from all of this. It doesn't mean that we don't have jobs to do, that we don't see ourselves in society as working together, but it means that we're doing it now with a heart of spirituality. but a heart of connectedness, of working together and knowing that what you do affects each other, affects me, affects all nature. And what I do does the same thing. We all are doing that together. And to be able to recognize, well, what is this vibration that goes through us? What is this virtue? What is this goodness that goes through us? And why would we want to not harmonize with that and to find ways in which we can do that? So that's what we're trying to do. That's the simple way of being able to say that we're looking towards our spirituality to help us to be able to harmonize this in this way. So the what, in this case, are the afflictive emotions. The why is to develop critical thinking so that we can have a recognition of wisdom of our pure nature, not just our physical body, not just our intellect, but our pure nature, our true nature, this spirituality that we talk about. That's why we're doing this. Otherwise, why would we be here? Because, we're human beings. We've got, we live in a good place. We live in a happy place generally, and we have all that we need generally, and that we can satisfy ourselves intellectually and so on, pretty much generally and so on. But why are we not satisfied with that? Why, when we reach middle age, do we say, oh, I'm in the middle of raising a family and I got all this responsibility. I'm trying to meet this responsibility, but there's something that I know is missing here, something I need to work for. And then when we reached our senior years, then we find that we've got more time on our hands. We've been successful in raising our families and so on. Now we've got time to be able to develop, those things that we've kind of put on hold. When we're young, sometimes we go off in all different kinds of directions. We're trying this, we're trying that, we're trying this. And we don't give things sometimes enough time to really develop and so on. And we're not seeing these disparate things, these different elements as all part of a whole. So, but those of us who are young and can see that, how focused they become and how their life becomes richer for them and for those around them, because they have this element of spirituality in their lives at a very early stage. In middle age, we may have put things on hold because we weren't ready. But if we can do it as when we're young, then when we get to our middle age, now our middle age takes on a whole different complexion, a whole different way in which it operates. And then when we're seniors, then now we become teachers. We become, those who have had a lot of experience doing different things, being successful in different things, failing in different things, and finding ways in which to express these things so that others can understand it and not unnecessarily have to go through and reinvent the wheel over and over and over again for themselves. We all have the individual responsibility of discovering our true nature for ourselves and liberating from these demons that we create for ourselves. But I'm talking about now the system by which we can begin to put this all together and recognize this, which brings us to the how. The how is the systematic, logical investigation. The systematic, logical investigation of what? Of our afflictive emotions. Of why? What it is to develop critical thinking. Why we do this. Why do we need, what is wisdom? What is the wisdom of our pure nature? To look at this with the tools of being able to say, I'm listening. I may not understand it right now, but I'm listening. and I'm going to study this. I'm going to think about this. I'm going to contemplate this. I'm going to pick it apart, and I'm going to put it back together again. I'm going to use it in terms of what my experience has been, and maybe I'm going to cross-reference it with other beings and what they've written about, what they've talked about, and be able to develop my own sensibility about this. So this is the contemplation. And then I'm going to allow myself to have a transcendent experience over and over again. That for us to be able to do this investigation takes a small portion of the power that we have within our brain. Let's say, for instance, it's 15%. So 85% of our brain is not being used in a way that we can appreciate, that we can understand. So what does that mean? What is that 85%? If we go and we focus our physical body, the energy that it takes to keep our physical body going, and if we settle our physical body down, and now we get our energy requirement for our physical body to such a low number, let's say, it's 5% for sake of discussion. So now we've got that other 95% that we can dedicate to something else. So then we move into our intellectualism. If we focus our intellectualism and stop our monkey mind from jumping from this to that, from this here to there, and constantly wasting our time on all these thoughts that we're chasing and so on, then maybe we can get our mind, our intellect, down to its 5%, that we can just quiet our mind down. So now we've got the energy that's being spent for our intellectual mind, the energy that's being spent on our physical body, and be able to use that, to channel that, to open up our big mind. Our big mind opens up. Our spirituality opens up. And what we have is experience in the transcendent. So maybe you've read something about the transcendent. Maybe you've heard something about the transcendent. Maybe it's something that has compelled you to be where you are right now. But nevertheless, we have that experience waiting for us. And so it's going through these elements that we've been talking about tonight to be able to see that this is how we launch ourselves into that transcendent, by being able to rest the body, rest the intellectual mind where all this investigation takes place. And then we can experience, we do it just without trying, because that true nature, that wisdom nature is who we are. It's there, but it's blocked up. It's covered up. What's it covered up with? It's covered up with our emotions. And if we can release our emotions, if we can cut off the causes of our emotions, then naturally this wisdom shines forth because it's already there. And that's what we're trying to do. So what do you think about this?
It sounds in a way liberating, but in a way scary too. I mean, if we experience significant loss of a loved one, for example, we'd expect to feel emotional about that. Does that serve us? I'm not sure if it does or not.
So that's correct, but we have to look at the emotions, and let's use the example of losing someone that's close to us. And we go through a process when we lose of emotions, when we go through that. And I forget exactly how it goes through, but there goes through a period of denial, there goes through a period of anger, there goes through a period of acceptance, and then there goes through a period of getting back into life. So maybe I've oversimplified that idea, but maybe you can understand where I'm going with this. So there's a process in place that when somebody passes like that we got to get back to our ordinary life, to our everyday life. The emotions that we're talking about here, the afflictive emotions, are if we let that passing of that person who was close to us, if it paralyzed us in our grief, if it paralyzed us in our anger, if it paralyzed us in our fearfulness that it could happen to us or whatever like that, then we're not moving on. We're getting paralyzed by that. So if our everyday emotions are paralyzing in the same way, we have to get over that. We have to transcend that. We have to learn how to do that. So to put it in other words, we can't overcome the emotions, or rather we can't destroy the emotions. But what we can do is stop them from controlling us. We can see that the emotions are there as a protective device within what it is to be a human being. It's part of our human nature, but not to be controlled by it, by our monkey mind. So does that make sense? Did I go around the circle and backwards and so on too much?
No, that makes sense to me. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. How about somebody else? Somebody make a comment, please. Viviana, I'd like to know what you think, because you are the young person here and full of hope and ideals and future and so on. What do you think of this? What does this mean to you, hearing this that I've said tonight?
I mean, it's hard to wrap my mind around a transcendental experience because I can't say that I've had one. And I don't know, they cannot destroy our emotions, but can stop them from controlling us. It kind of reminds me of Stoicism, but I don't really resonate with Stoicism. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I like the cohesion of spirituality and stuff like that. I enjoy it.
Okay. So the idea, so when we talked about the cohesion part, that meant something to you. You can
Yeah.
see.
I think I know that there's a symbol on the front of the temple that has like a little interconnectedness symbol.
That's right.
And I do believe that, like, yeah, we all play a part in the world, and every one of us is connected to the next, whether
So
that's like animals or nature or humans.
can you see the cohesion then as a benefit?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think anybody can accomplish everything by themselves.
What do you think about the education part, or not the the enrichment part, as being another benefit?
The enrichment part of being another you mean like as a like an antidote to ignorance? Are you talking about that?
Well, enrichment was was the benefit of 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 being able to be generous with things that we have, be it physical things or be it intellectual things, but the generosity and the benefit of that was the
Enrichment.
enrichment that we
Yeah.
become.
I mean, that makes sense. Yeah, performing selfless acts always make me feel good, So
Good. Okay. We're going to come back to these benefits again, because I think to be able to focus on these is really an important feature of of what we need to recognize for ourselves. Gary, did you have something that you wanted to say?
Well, I was only going to say that Buddhism does not keep us from being fully human. And having a lot of the emotions, some of them are obscurations and are destructive emotions that human beings have. But it can give us a refuge, a resting place for those emotions sometimes, a place for us to put them and to deal with them. That's at least my way of looking at it. So I think that it doesn't eliminate those forces in us or in our society, but it helps us to respond to them and in a way that is enriching and makes us better. That's what it does for me when I do it right.
Right, and that's the systematic, logical investigation. You know, and so what the Buddhism gives us is that tool, is that system, that logical, tool to be able to do that. I haven't encountered this. It may be in other traditions, and maybe, but whether in Judaism or in Hinduism or in Christianity, it's not part of the everyday conversation. But in Buddhism, you open up a book and, it starts breaking things down for you very quickly. The Jewel Ornament of Liberation is that manual. And depending on what page, what chapter you go to, it's going to be talking about elements of what that system is. Tom, what do you think? Did I don't know that we've talked about these benefits very much. How did this land on you?
Also, the way you were breaking it down for us is wonderful. That we can use it, in our everyday lives, and it's well, when we're talking about these afflictive emotions, we tend to mix up two things that I think that brings us a lot of emotions unnecessary. That's love and attachment. And those two things are completely two different things. We associate those things together. When we have that attachment, that's when that afflictive emotion kicks in. And, if it's love, if it's true unconditional love, there's less emotion involved. But it's that affliction of attachment that we because when we have attachment, it's a lot of self-grasping that we do, and that's what brings us so much afflictive emotions, stirs up so much things, but that's what we're doing here, to learn to let go of some of those things, not to attach ourselves so deeply into those things. And it's so easy, to mix up love and attachment. We do it all the time. We think those things go together, but they're farthest. They're two complete different things. But the way you're explaining things, it shows us how to associate those two things. That they are different. They are not the same. That one will bring pain, the other one will liberate us. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So we're talking in English here, but if somebody, came in and was Spanish speaking, and here's our English words, but can't make any sense of what it is that we're talking about, the language becomes, an impediment to their being able to understand where we are. When the Buddha taught, this was taught in the Sanskrit language. And the Sanskrit language at that time didn't have an alphabet. It wasn't, you couldn't write it down. And it was several hundred years before a visual component of that language started to develop and so on. Before that happened, there was a Pali language. I don't know a whole lot about the details about this, but the Pali, it was written down in the Pali. And then it got spread around and went to, China, went to Korea, and went to Mongolia, and went to Ceylon, and went to Southeast Asia, went to all these different nations where people were speaking different languages and so on. But one of the characteristics that each of these languages carried with it was a symbolism of light, that they were taught to recognize these things as light. For when we sit down and really have a meditative experience, are we thinking in English? Are we having that experience in English? Are we having it in Spanish? Are we having it in Sanskrit or any of the other languages? And if we try and have it in those languages, if we say, oh, I never understand the Sanskrit words for this, but I can understand the English, but the English might be, a paragraph that the same Sanskrit language has one word, that in English it becomes a whole paragraph. So it becomes kind of cumbersome, and it can become an impediment to our being able to be free while we're sitting on the cushion. So what I'm leading up to is that when we transcend, we're transcending whether we're speaking in English or whether we're speaking in Spanish or Sanskrit or any of the other human languages. We transcend into another language altogether. And this language has light as the conveyance of thought. It's elevated thought. It's high thought. It's meditative thought. So the water, that which is in the water sign, the water quadrant that we were talking about, where hatred and the loving kindness that wears down the hatred and the benefit of cohesion, the color of that is blue. So to be able to start making that representation in your mind now, intellectually, that as soon as we start talking about that, if I say hatred, all of a sudden you think about blue. If I start talking about hatred, you start thinking about water, and water is blue. And we start thinking about cohesion, and we start linking these ideas together, these concepts together. So by creating your own little spreadsheet of these things would be very important. So greed, if I start talking about greed, and greed was in that yellow section, the yellow quadrant, the earth has a yellow representation to it. And that the benefit there is enrichment. So if we're talking about enrichment right away, you can, have that flash of yellow light, not in your eyes, but we're opening up our heart mind. We're bringing our intellectual and our heart mind together in the same radio station. We're tuning it together. So this light is the way that we have meditative experience. So if we train ourselves to make these intellectual, conceptual understandings, then when we go into the meditative state, in that transcendent state, we have a way of being able to understand what's going on. Our intellectual brain can tune into that. It is tuned into that. So for those people, many people, we've all had experience. We've all been born many times. We've all died many times. We're spiritual beings, whether we want to be or not. We know this language of light. And it's a question of remembering it through our experience, through allowing ourselves to have that transcendent experience. So you can have the experience of blue, you can have the experience of yellow. The next one would be red. The experience of red would be the desire, the emotion of desire that's overcome by this objectivity of being able to look at what is the cause of this desire, what is the focus of this desire. And this has this red component to it, and this red component is indicative of the cooking of these things together, of this ripening, of this coming together, this heating up of this coming together. You know, when you bring these things together, they begin to cook on their own. You ever eat ceviche? You don't eat ceviche? You know what ceviche is? Ceviche is a delicious appetizer that they serve, in Mexico, and I guess maybe Spain, I don't know, but I know in Mexican food. And they take all these different elements of onions and different spices and usually some fish, some shrimp or some other kinds of white fish or something like that. And they bring it all together in this kind of brine, and it cooks. It makes its own heat. It cooks the shrimp. It cooks the raw fish and everything. Isn't that right? Did I describe it accurately enough? So it cooks on its own. When you bring the right ingredients together, they come together and it cooks the meat. It cooks the food. So it doesn't need an external source of heat. It's generating it itself. So when we eat food in our body, we bring it down. Nobody's lighting a match to our stomach or to our intestines. But when that food comes down and is broken down in our body, in our intestines and so on, it begins to cook. And gases are given off and nutrients are released and all these different kinds of things. And we have all this, the natural flora, it's called. The flora is the natural bacteria that we have within our body, is like the source of the matches to break down that food, and it creates the heat. You ever think about where your body heat comes from? It comes from your digestive system, from this breaking down of the food. So this ripening is this cooking, is this coming together. So the red color, you see, has a direct relationship to that. So you think red, you think ripening, you think cooking, you're thinking desire, you're thinking fire, all this coming together. You're thinking the wisdom of discriminating awareness. See, so if we apply the wisdom of each of these afflictive emotions, then we begin to, then we start looking out for what the wisdom is, what the intellectual, what the heart wisdom, that connection is, not just the color, but now what it means to us, how we can communicate it to ourselves and to other people. So it's a system. Then the next thing would be the jealousy. When we think of jealousy and then we apply the fearlessness to it, the fearlessness allows us to move about, and we use the element of the wind. The wind has no, it just moves. It's invisible. It just moves all the time. And it's the color green. And, have you ever heard the expression green with envy or green with jealousy? So we can begin to make these associations. But it's also the all-accomplishing wisdom. This all-accomplishing wisdom. To be paralyzed will be to be paralyzed in the jealousy aspect of not having been able to realize the all-accomplishing wisdom. So I'm paralyzed by not being able to be successful in understanding what that is. But if I let the wind move, if I let it move more, if I allow myself more time with it and so on, we begin to break down, we begin to wear down the obstacles. And then the next one was the delusion, which is like darkness, ignorance. Then if we use the light of education to enlighten, to turn on the light switch of that darkness, and we have the growth, the benefit is the growth, and that becomes the white light. The white light. Being able to see where there was darkness before. If we take white light and we break it down through a prism, we get the other colored lights. So the white light is kind of like what we have here around us. What are the color of the light bulbs? It produces, we say this white light. Or if we buy yellow bulbs, or we buy yellow or red bulbs or blue bulbs or anything. But we want white light because then we see things naturally, not colored by the bulb. So there, the wisdom from that is the all-pervading wisdom that pervades all things, that permeates, penetrates everything that we understand physically, intellectually, and spiritually. So those 5 colors, white, red, blue, green, and yellow, are the 5 lights of the transcendent meditative mind. And they become representative of the 5 Buddha families. So many other things begin to become associated, identified with those 5 lights. So again, by writing these things down, looking at these things, making the associations of these things, and waiting for the experiences to come, when all of a sudden it fits together, you have that epiphany, you have that aha moment. Oh, that's what Lance was talking about. Right now, I'm just telling you, well, here are screws, here are nuts, here are bolts, here are screwdrivers, here are pliers, here's all these different tools. But when they all fit together, when you find that you have a job to do and you need all these different tools, then you're able to make something of it. So that's what we're talking about here, all these different ideas that will mean something to you if you're able to process them, to bring it together and give yourself the opportunity to contemplate and meditate on these things. So last week, if you watched our video or if you were present with us last week, we did a meditation watching the breath. And this watching the breath is a very simple process to give ourselves the ability to transcend our ordinary thought process. If we really go deep, if we give ourselves enough time with that, and we have a system in place of being able to focus our brain power, then we can begin to recognize those lights. We can begin to make those associations between these things and so on. And by doing it over and over again, it becomes more and more stable, it becomes more and more predictable. You say, you know what, I'm going to meditate on this tonight. I'm going to
Lance?
think about this tonight. Yes.
Uh, I will agree with you on that, or give you some support on that, because I've started to do that. I have developed a habit of sometime in midday going to a place nearby where I go and sitting on a bench and doing a mala round of the 6-syllable mantra. And then I will do the breath exercise that you're talking about. And it really affects a change that I feel, a sense of focus and calm. And then I go for a walk in a wooded area where there's no interruptions and things like that. And it really makes it is really worth trying. So I would encourage people to do that. You don't have to do it like I do it. That is sort of my structure for it, but it's very helpful, I think.
Yes, very good. Thank you. And what we're doing on Saturdays when we go down to Dharma Surya and do the deity yoga practice is bringing the deity aspect to it and associating those colors now with this particular deity who is working on this particular problem to purify and purify the causes of that problem, those emotions, and to be able to result in a perfection of stability, of being able to overcome and then abide, live, dwell in the wisdom of that experience. So it's one thing to talk about these things and say, well, go do this. And Gary says, oh yeah, I go sit on a park bench and I do this and I have that experience and everything. But Gary's been doing this for years now, and he's got, other experience to support him and everything. So what we're trying to do on our Saturdays is to give the support to come together in a proper place at the shrine room to be able to give more experience with this, with the Sangha, with our brothers and sisters that are there. There's other material there. There's written material that we can share better there than we can on Zoom and so on. So it's a great resource to be able to do that. It is a great technique to be able to do that. And if it's inconvenient to do it at that time, but you want to do it, then talk to me about it. And let's figure out how we can work together to give you the opportunity to be able to have that experience, to learn how to meditate together. That's why we're here. So I've said many times, that, in the old country, when you went into the room with a teacher, and there's 5 or 6 or 10 students, however many there are, and the teacher comes in and takes his place in the front of the room, and the students all settle down and everything, and then everybody goes into meditation. The teacher goes into meditation. And if it's the time prescribed for that is 1 hour or 2 hours, that they're going to be together, then the teacher will meditate for 1 hour or 2 hours until one of the students speaks up and says, oh, teacher, would you please explain such and such to me, please? Or I'm not sure about what this means. Can you give some clarity about that? And then the teacher will immediately come out of his meditation and we'll teach on that. So my point in saying that is that it is a two-way street. It is a discussion, and that the students need to request what they want from the teacher. In the old country, it's done that way. Here, it's advertised, oh, we're going to talk about this, that, or the other thing, and you decide whether you want to come in. And then if you're going to give an offering for it, you give an offering at the end if it had any value to you. In the old country, they give the offering first. Oh, teacher, please, here's my precious stone. Please, please give me this teaching. I'm not asking for anything, but I'm just pointing out to you. So if you want to learn this stuff, if you want to meditate, you want to put this into practice, we're here to help you do that. If you're not getting what you need, then speak up and we'll figure out a way to help. So can you see that there's a system in place?
Yeah, I do see that.
Has
It's-
this, go ahead,
sorry.
I'm sorry, I cut you off.
I mean, I was just wondering, like, oops, how to cultivate things like fearlessness and unimpededness, and false of samsara, like how to build upon those.
Through the deity yoga is the best way to do it. And through everything that we've been talking about, you know, it's one thing to intellectualize these things, but it's another thing to practice the meditative process. And then you begin to recognize the wisdom within yourself. With that, so with just reading about, just hearing about it doesn't result in the experience. You've got to open yourself up to the experience. You got to meditate. There may be some who doesn't do it that way, but it's only because they've got past karma where they just needed this opportunity to ripen. But I'm not so sure that any of us are in that category. Does that make sense, Viviana? That you got to open yourself up to the possibility. You got to learn more. You got to practice more. That's the
that makes
key.
sense.
That's the key. What
Hey,
would,
Lance,
yes, sir.
this weekend, this Saturday, before we started our deity yoga practice, you threw a question out there. Why do we do deity yoga practice?
Yes.
Simple question. Why are we here? Why do we do deity yoga practice?
Okay.
And,
You asking me or are you?
no, I mean, yes, I'm asking you. You know, I mean, I've done this many times with you. So, you know, as a student of yours, I'm asking the teacher, why do we do deity yoga practice?
Where are we trying to get to? What's our goal?
Enlightenment.
Okay. Enlightenment could be said to be Buddhahood, right? Could be said to be liberation. So that's our goal. We could call it liberation. We could call it enlightenment. We could call it Buddhahood. If we want to go someplace and we don't know how to get there, we have the ideal, we'd like to be there. Should we, do we walk up to somebody and who looks like they're peaceful and say, hey, you look like you're a Buddha. Will you teach me how to get to Buddhahood? You know, of course not, you know, but would you go to someone who has that reputation, who has that credential, so to speak, and say, oh, I know that you've been there, you've been trained in this. Will you teach me how to do this? And that would be wise to do that. But then when you're asking another human being, you might be getting their skew on things, the way they look at it this way or that way. They spin it in a way that maybe has their pridefulness automatically built into it. So he's going to bring that to you, or she is going to bring that to you. However, there are perfect teachers. There are perfect Buddhas. And they are the deity yoga. They are those that we follow, that we are looking to be our teachers, that have perfectly been able to overcome the causes of the afflictive emotions and to bring those results onto the path that lead to enlightenment. So if we want to go to enlightenment, if we want to become liberated, if we want to go to Buddhahood, why wouldn't we want to go to the perfect teachers? So that's what the deity yoga is. The perfect teaching, the perfect method of instruction of how to attain liberation, enlightenment, Buddhahood from these masters. So deity is a word that connotes, this sacred, holy spirituality within ourselves. It's not a deity like a supreme God or something like that is out there. We don't know anything about that for sure, but we know what we got here. So the deity is this that we have within ourselves. And yoga, the word yoga is a Sanskrit word that simply means union. Union with the deity. We've already got it within ourselves, but again, it's blocked up. And what we're trying to do is remove the blockages. The blockages are the emotions. So we're trying to do that. And the deity yoga will teach us how to do that.
Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome. I hope it wasn't too long an explanation. So, sometimes we talk about, samsara, we use the name samsara, and sometimes we use the name nirvana. And when we go to sit down on the cushion to do our practice, receive our teachings, to do meditation, we're sitting down with a mind of samsara. All these things are churning around and in our head and so on like that. Our body might feel agitated. Our heart maybe is a little bit unsteady. But our intention is that by sitting here and going through the steps, the stages of meditation, we'll be able to quiet things down. We'll be able to rest the body, rest the intellectual mind from jumping around, focus, and then be able to open up the heart and have a good experience of nirvana. So there's a mind of samsara when we sit down. And if we're successful in the process of that meditation, we develop or we open up the mind of nirvana. And we want to be in nirvana all the time. Why would we want to be in this agitated, confused state of samsara all the time? Can we be in nirvana and still do all the same things that we do? Go to work, go to school, be with our family, go with our friends, whatever it is that we do, we can do it with a mind of nirvana. We may begin to simplify ourselves and we may say, you know what, those things just pull me down. They interrupt my nirvana. And I don't want to interrupt my nirvana. And I start deciding, making choices. I'm not going to do those things. I'm not going to go with those people. I'm not going to put myself in those situations because they jeopardize or they pull me out of my nirvana back into my samsaric mind. And then I don't feel good. I want to go back to being my true self, my nirvanic self. So when we think about it, that we do that, that we've got this mind of nirvana. And there's lots of people that I could point to who I know are in nirvana. They may not be 100%, stable in that, but for the most part, they might be 60%, 70%, 80%, 90%, something like that. And just because they can't be 100%, let's say they're 75%, is that any reason to think that they shouldn't be in that nirvana state of mind? That it's worthwhile, I'll just stay in samsara mind. What do you think about that, Viviana?
I mean, it makes sense because there's no such thing as perfect, but I don't know.
When I was a teenager, when I was, in my 20s, my 30s, I've certainly had a lot of fun in my life. And most all that fun was non-wholesome behavior. It was at somebody else's expense, my expense of nirvana. It was tomfoolery and things like that, and you're having such fun, getting drunk, getting high, driving fast, doing all the things that we would do, and then as I kind of came out of that mindset and I started recognizing my unwholesomeness and started aspiring to my wholesomeness, I found that I was losing friends. Things were becoming simpler for me. People weren't calling me and I wasn't calling them. We weren't getting together to do the same things anymore. But I was happier. I was much more satisfied with myself and my surroundings, and whatever anxieties and fears and confusions that I had naturally were transformed into the mind of nirvana. So Viviana, your question about how do we overcome our fearfulness and everything, that all comes naturally by learning all this. All those emotions naturally take care of themselves. We don't say, okay, now we're going to sit down and work on this particular fear or that particular fear or that particular emotion. We work on it in a broader scope, and these things begin to take place within our whole self. It's a holistic experience. It's not just any little thing, it's a holistic thing. One thing is touching the other thing, which touches something else, and so on like that. When I first started teaching at Dharma Surya, there was this woman who came up to me and she said, well, I'm so emotional. My husband is so sick, he's going through dementia and everything. I mean, this was a senior woman, and she was an Asian woman. And she, she would say, I'm so emotional and everything, and my mind's always going. Can you help me? Can you help me? I said, sure, please, come to our one-on-one classes. He said, oh, can I learn there? I said, well, yeah, so she started coming, and we did these 8-week cycles and everything. And after the first 8 weeks, he said, well, I'm still emotional. I said, well, keep coming, you know? And she came for about 3 years. Each eight-week cycle, she just kept coming and kept coming and kept coming. And slowly, she learned what the emotions were, what the causes of the emotions were, how to overcome the emotions. And she did it on her own, you know, and we pointed it out to her, but she developed her meditation and she began to apply it. And then she became the non-emotional person that she wanted to be. So I think that's what we've all done, you know, to whatever degree we've been successful at it at any rate. Okay, so unless somebody else has anything you want to talk about, Tom, I got to ask you, and Gary, I'll ask you too, because you guys have, you know, been in Buddhism 101 now for a couple of years and so on, and gone through these cycles, you know, many times now and everything. Does this method that we're doing feel a little different to you? Is it no different?
Go ahead, Gary.
I'm not
Huh?
sure I fully understand the question.
What were you going to say, Tom?
Well, you've done this many different ways. You've done this the very traditional sense of, you know, going through the 6 realms, and you've spent, you know, sometimes weeks doing that, you know, and you've gone through the very basic teachings of Buddhism. Then you've gone through certain, you know, teachings of more of a teaching for a first hour, and then maybe a discussion for the other hour. And, you know, you've approached many different ways, you know, many different angles. And it's a lot of times it's different strokes for different folks, you know. Some people want to hear it. Some people are ready to hear it. Some people are not, you know. And if they're ready to hear it, it's very comforting. It's very it makes sense. But if you're not, it's, you know, it's just you're not ready to hear it. I mean, what can I say? But yeah, I mean, the approaches that you've taken are very methodic, very helpful to the students here, you know. And, you know, I enjoy it. You know, it's like I said, I've this might what coming up on 3 years now, you know. And it's, you know, even though it's the very basic teachings, but there's a reason why we listen to the teachings, the basic stuff over and over, is to be mindful of those things. And that's the main key, is to be mindful. You know, whatever we do, whatever we say, whatever we think, whatever, you know, just be mindful of that. And that's what, you know, that's what these basics teachings do, is keep you, or teaches us a sense of mindfulness. And, you know, if you have that mindfulness, you know, it's that's half the work right there. And you just got to keep at it, you know, because some people, oh, these are just fundamental teachings. Oh, these are basic teachings, but they're the ones, those are the ones that really help. You need a good solid foundation if you're going to build a house. If you don't have a solid foundation, that house will crumble immediately. That's what this is doing, is setting a very solid foundation.
When you practice them, the teachings in your life, Buddhism, all the things I've learned here, and things I've read in the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, and all the and Kempo's books, Essence of Mahayana Teachings, you begin to apply them to your life, and you begin to practice them as a way of life. What I have found is that I have left a good part of the world that I lived in and the life that I lived at least part of it I've left behind, and I'm continuing to leave it behind. And inevitably, when you do this sort of practice, and you change the way you live, leave some of the inhabitants of your world behind. Not that they're bad people, but if you've changed and they haven't, if you're doing this practice and the things that mattered so much to you before, it's not that they aren't important anymore, that you understand what your limitations are and how you have to live your life. A lot of the things in samsara cannot be changed by one individual. One individual can change one individual by living the practice. But there are people that have left my life, not because they're bad people, because they haven't changed, and I found that I have started to change slowly, very slowly. But as you hear these things over and over, and after all the years that I have lived, you have to hear them over and over again, because we have habitualized, our behaviors within a world where certain actions and reactions are expected. And you step outside that paradigm and into Buddhism, your world changes. And the people in it who live in your world change. The faces change. You move on. And it's a good thing. It's growth. It can never happen too late. I wish it had happened sooner, but it didn't. It is what it is. So I go on from here.
Very good. Thank you. Brendan, I'd just like to hear if you have any comment.
Well, I've got a lot going on right now. I enjoyed just now hearing from Thomas and Gary. Viviana, your talk on fear, I loved it because I've been meditating on fear all night. There's a guy named Tim Page. When Lance was driving fast and doing things like that he talked about, Tim Page was in Vietnam taking pictures of that awful war. And he died a few days ago. That's why I was thinking about him. He passed away, but he went to this island led by a Buddhist yogi. They had other spiritual elements there as well, but both sides could come together in peace on this island. And what I think those guys were escaping was violence, including Tim Page, but escaping fear as well. And that's one thing that's really driven me, interested me in Buddhism is an antidote to fear. And I noticed that one of the 6 poisons is not fear, but one of the 6 antidotes is fearlessness. So just something I've been thinking about tonight.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Okay. Viviana, did you want to mention anything else before we close? Okay. All right. I'm always interested in what the youngest people say, because they see it, with different, with a fresher point of view. They haven't been conditioned like we've been conditioned. So that's either a good thing or a bad thing. It can be one or the other. All right. Well, very good. Thank you. If you don't mind, then we'll end tonight and we'll do our dedication prayers. So we'll do the lineage dedication, and then we'll go and we'll do the dedication prayer by Lord Jigdan Sumgun. So I may pause in between sections just to give some explanation for you. Let me just say, if you go to your book, page 18, we see at the bottom is the bodhicitta prayer. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind. So what we're trying to develop is bodhicitta, this holy mind, and this is the mind of all the enlightened ones. And we have this mind but it's blocked up. What we're trying to do again is just release the blockages and so on. So that's a very important thing. Bodhicitta is that holy enlightened mind. That's where I said that, and you can say one word, bodhicitta, and then there's books written about bodhicitta, lots and lots of books written about it. Then if we turn to page 21, so I just want to, this dedication prayer by Lord Jigden Sumgun. Jigden Sumgun is the founder of our particular lineage, which is 800 years ago. And this lineage was very, very, very popular through southern Tibet, going all the way over into eastern Tibet over these past 800 years and so on. Things change, and things come in favor and go out of favor and so on like that. But this lineage has continued for all these years. And there were times when there was a lot of conflict and friction. There was the throne holder, who was the head of the lineage. So Jigden Sumgun was the founder, so he's the original throne holder. And then when he passed, then another throne holder came, and then another, when he passed, another one came, and so on like that. So the throne holder is really regarded as being, very, very pure, really trying to be very perfect and everything, and to do everything, and that the responsibility is there for them to try and be as pure as they can. So there's the throne holder, and then there's the monastic body of people that are in that lineage, for that generation of time or two generations, whatever. So that's all the monastics, and it can be the male monastics and the female monastics. So they talk about the monks and the nuns and so on. So there's that element there too, and then there's the lay element, because then there's the people of the community, of the village that supports the monastery and so on. So there's those people too. So there's a study that we can read that goes through and takes it year by year, throne holder by throne holder, about how things work. Sometimes the monastics are fighting between themselves, and sometimes they're trying to fight with the throne holder. And then sometimes they're trying to fight with the lay people. And then the lay people are fighting between themselves sometimes. And sometimes they're fighting with the monastics, and sometimes they're fighting with the throne holder. The throne holder in those situations generally would get out of town. He would leave and he would go to some kind of a retreat center or some cave or something like that. And he would do everything he could to try and preserve his mind of nirvana. And people would come to him. Might be lay people come to him. It might be that monastics come to him. And he would talk with them and so on, but they would have to leave so that he could maintain his purity. And then, but the monastics might still continue to fight, and the other conflicts would go. So there was these vicissitudes over these 800 years. There are these shifting changes of these conflicts, but there were these golden periods where everything came together that would last for a generation, 2 generations, maybe not more than 2 generations, maybe a third, something like that. And then stuff would happen, and then there'd be conflict, and it would break apart, but it would come back together again. So it's kind of like a metaphor for the human being story. Just because they're monastics doesn't mean that they are 100% pure, that they all have the mind of nirvana. They may be trying for that, but the way in which they try sometimes can be creating conflict and so on. So I just point that out to you, that this is what we're trying to do. And sometimes it blends, sometimes it's golden, sometimes it seems like it's about to fall apart. But it's our devotion that is what carries it through those difficult times. So it's important to establish that mindfulness of devotion. Okay, so back to page 18. Dorje Chang, Talopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Dharma Lord Gampopa, Dagma Drupa, and Lord Kumpa. Please bestow upon us the most auspicious blessing, excuse me, of all the Kaju Lamas. By this virtue may I achieve the all-knowing state, and may all who travel on the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara by defeating all enemies, confusion, the cause of suffering. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. I pray that the Lama may have good health. I pray that the Lama may have long life. I pray that your Dharma activities spread far and wide. I pray that I may not be separated from you. As Manjushri the warrior realized the ultimate state, and as did Samantabhadra, I will follow in their path and fully dedicate all the merit for all sentient beings. By the blessing of the Buddha, who attained the three kayas, by the blessing of the truth of the unchanging Dharma as such, by the blessing of the indivisible Sangha order, may the merit I share bear fruit. By the virtues collected in the three times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate word of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Trikampa Ratna Shri, who is omniscient, Lord of the Dharma, master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Yogins, Yoginis, and Dakinis, dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the three times by myself and all sentient beings in samsara and nirvana and the innate word of virtue not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Shravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Maras, and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind, not even for a moment. Excuse me. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you very much, everybody.